So I'll start the Dhamma discussion, the sharing, with my usual greeting. Good morning, early morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and Europe. Good early evening to our friends in the Arab states and India. Good evening to our friends in Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia. Good late evening to our friends in Australia. Nice to see you. Hope you're well. We have a number of questions, JC.
Question 1. Dear Ajahn, you recently encouraged people joining your upcoming pilgrimage to read the great disciples of the Buddha. May I ask, which is your favorite great disciple?
You may ask. Okay, so my favorite great disciples. I mean, it's a wonderful book to read. That book, it's very interesting, informative, and also entertaining. We modern people, we need things to be entertaining as well. That's one of the drawbacks of having grown up as people of our generation. It needs to be informative and also a little bit entertaining. So my favorite great disciple is Sariputta. He's not necessarily because he had equal wisdom to the Buddha. Obviously, that's amazing, and he was known as the like the mother, the wet nurse. He was famous for getting people to the level of stream entry. And then Mahamoggallana, with his psychic powers, could see where people's obstructions remained and what things would benefit them. And Mahamoggallana was famous for helping people to finish their work, become arahants. But it was more the qualities. And it's not surprising that Sariputta should have amazing qualities, because to be a great disciple, well, first of all, to be a Buddha, one needs to practice for 4 incalculable periods from the point of receiving the prediction of Buddhahood from a previous Buddha, another 4 incalculable periods, which is millions and millions of eons, plus 100,000 eons. That's to be a teaching Buddha with the wisdom proclivity, the wisdom foremost quality. And of course, it can take longer if you do it with the faith. It can take 8 incalculable periods, or if you take the modum operandi of effort, it's 16 incalculable periods. So the wisdom approach to Buddhahood is faster. And to be a great disciple, one of the Lord Buddha's left hand or right hand man, that's 2 incalculable periods plus 100,000 eons. So they developed their virtue for half the time of Lord Buddha, and so developed many remarkable qualities. And so it's said about Sariputta that he was willing to admonish his students, I think it was up to 500 times. And I find that amazing. For myself, I feel like if I've had a stubborn student and I've had to prompt them or remind them or admonish them twice, 3 times, it starts to get a bit tedious and a bit boring, and there's a feeling in me that, well, I've told them already. And Lompo Liam has a personal policy, the current abbot of Wat Nompapong. He feels that his duty to try to train and warn his students is to tell them 3 times that they shouldn't do something that's unskillful. But apparently Sariputta was willing to do it 500 times, which is just amazing, his patience. And another thing that says about his character is that he would, when Lord Buddha traveled to teach in other regions, Sariputta would go towards the end of the line, and he would make sure that the smaller novices were properly dressed and properly packed, and and also the older ones and the sick people. He would make sure that the kind of stragglers at the tail end of the community were okay. And similarly with sick bhikkhus, he would try to find out what food their mum used to make them when they were sick. Just really beautiful, nurturing qualities. And he also had perfect and fully complete wisdom barami, so he was perfectly capable of teaching and did teach, I'm sure, many thousands, possibly tens of thousands of people. And I think there was one occasion where somebody threw a clod of dirt at Sariputta from behind, and no anger arose in his mind, of course, because when someone was asked, it's amazing, it's wonderful, it's marvelous, it's amazing that the Venerable Sariputta did not get upset when somebody threw dirt at you. And he says, having perfected mindfulness, he says, well, that's because I didn't perceive of a self being abused. I was aware of a feeling. I was aware of a body moving, and I didn't have the thought that I have been abused. And so he just had, perfect, pure wisdom, perfect, pure mindfulness, and the beautiful character traits that he developed over those two incalculable periods plus 100,000 eons. So he's my favorite. My second favorite is Venerable Ananda, and he's such a nice guy. It's said about Ananda that he had no enemies. So that's very interesting. Like even Lord Buddha spent longer, but he had Devadatta as his kind of jealous and competitive cousin, causing problems here and there. And everyone liked Ananda, which is like that's not a small accomplishment to have everybody that knows you like you. So he was such a sweet guy, and apparently he was really handsome. There was one. There was one. It's like, at least you get some benefits from your 100,000 eons. Right. Apparently there was one nun. I think she fainted 200 times. Every time she saw Sariputta, she fainted because he was so good looking. I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. That I don't think personally I would want to live with that. That would be a bit. I'll take moderate, ordinary handsomeness, but but to be so handsome that people look at you and faint, I don't know. It's kind of cool, isn't it? And but Ananda, he's almost like the Bodhisattva type in the Theravada. He's the example of the Bodhisattva type because he didn't become an arahant until later. He did become a stream enterer, and since the time when he attended the Lord Buddha, it is said that he never had a lustful thought arise. His mind was always inclined to such positive things. He didn't have unwholesome mind states arise, even though he wasn't an anagami or an arahant. His mind was so utterly pure and wholesome. And but Ananda, he was like liaising, like the chief liaison officer. He was the one that knew, and he was helping all of these people to have time with the Buddha. He knew when it was the right time for the Buddha to talk to the farmers, the potters, the hunters. He also knew when the right time was for the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, and he knew the Buddha's rhythm, and he knew what was the right time for the kings. And so he was like doing this scheduling and doing the ushering in of people and helping hundreds of thousands of people to have that precious time with the Buddha, so Buddha could encourage them, and then many of those people became enlightened. And so Ananda was wonderful. But the other thing about Ananda is he made an agreement. He made the Buddha make an agreement with him that if he was to be his attendant, he had certain conditions. One of those conditions was that every single teaching the Buddha gave somebody, if Ananda wasn't present, that Lord Buddha should relay that teaching to him. And then, as a testament to Ananda's mindfulness, right recollection, it's sometimes translated to, Lord Ananda was able to remember every single teaching that he heard and that the Buddha told him about. And so when it came time to have the first council after the Buddha passed away, Mahakassapa called a first council, and they recorded. They didn't record it; they committed it to memory. Some people have doubts and suspicions about this. I personally don't. Right? I know many monks. We just chanted the Dhammacakka Sutta. It takes 25 minutes. I know that by heart. when I was at Watnanachat a couple of years ago, Ajahn Kevali, Ajahn Akaliko, myself, we were just chanting it all by heart. I know monks who know the Patimokkha 45-minute chant. 3 in my monastery can chant the 45-minute chant. So it's like if people with attention deficiencies like us can manage to remember 45 minutes, half an hour chants, I can probably chant a couple of hours of chants by memory if I wanted to. And so Ananda was able to relay every single sutta that he'd heard, thousands and thousands of them, and correctly. So when any sutta that starts with "Thus have I heard," that means Ananda remembered it and Ananda relayed it at the first council when it became canonized and organized, and it was decided. It was probably decided which monasteries would take care of which sutta pitaka, which monastery would memorize which ones, and it wasn't until some hundreds of years later that the suttas were written down in text form. And so that incredible memories, and that's one of the functions of mindfulness, is you can remember. When you have good mindfulness, tend to have a good memory. What was said on what occasion to who. So we owe a lot to Ananda. We owe a lot. And then there's the occasion of the bhikkhunis, of course. It was Ananda that asked 3 times. And I have a theory about this. I have a theory that there was always going to be bhikkhunis, because when you go to the Buddha's enlightenment, the Mara comes to him after his enlightenment and says, "You're not enlightened." Mara, of course, has no problem lying to a Buddha. He's a master of deception. And the Buddha says, "Oh, yes, I am." And then Mara says, "Well, don't tell anyone." And he says, "Well, I will not stop until there are bhikkhu and bhikkhuni enlightened disciples." This is under the Bodhi tree before he's even started to teach. He's announced to Mara there will be bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. And then he says, "Well, stop then." He says, "No, I will not stop until there are novices and samaneras and samaneries, upasikas and upasikas, lay men and lay women, enlightened disciples." So that was from the get-go. But of course, because in the time of Lord Buddha, women were seen as property of their fathers, of their brothers, of their husbands, and they didn't have much rights, it was going to be a bit of I think there had to be some politics, some posturing, some strategy. And I think Ananda was the fall guy. Everybody got to the people it was like the people who felt it was a blemish on the Buddha's reputation to include women, they could blame Ananda. And Ananda took it on the chin. It's like he's literally saying to the Buddha, "But isn't this woman the one that like fed you from her breast when you were a child? Isn't it the case that women have the same potential for enlightenment?" And then a second time and a third time, and he says, "Okay, Ananda." But he had announced from the beginning that there were going to be bhikkhunis, and I think it was a matter of Ananda doing what had to be done to get the bill passed, as it were. And my third favorite disciple is Anuruddha. Anuruddha was foremost in the divine eye, but he had so much merit. The story from his childhood was that he was playing with his friends and he wanted to give them cakes. So he sent a message to his mum, "Mum, I want cakes." So mum sent cakes and he shared his cakes with his friends. And then they were still having fun and he sent to mum, "Mum, I want more cakes." And the mum sent back the tray with more cakes. Third time, "Mum, we need more cakes." And the mum wrote a note under a tray, "There aren't any more cakes." But apparently Anuruddha had so much merit that the devas saw that he wanted cakes and there wasn't cakes. So the devas put cakes in the tray. And the cakes tasted so nice when Anuruddha ate the cakes and he read the note and the mum had read, "There isn't any cakes." Anuruddha says, "Oh, these isn't any cakes. There isn't any cakes are really delicious." I just think that's cool. You have so much merit that you can't go without something that you want. In a world with so much lack and hardship and difficulty, it's kind of cool. And but the thing about he was able to see any being in all of samsara in the present and in the past, and he was always also able to see where any being was reborn. And very interestingly enough, it was a function of mindfulness. Apparently, he was foremost in mindfulness. So he could be mindful of any place in samsara that he set his mind on. He could be mindful of another person's mind or consciousness. And he could set the determination to be mindful of that, and he saw it with perfect accuracy. So he was foremost in the divine eye. And he had vast merits. And he's my third favorite. So, of course, if you read the Teri Katha and you read about the bhikkhunis, there was the bhikkhuni who was foremost in wisdom, and there was the bhikkhuni who was foremost in psychic powers, similar to Sariputta and Mahamokkallana. And there was of course, the senior nuns attendants and many wonderful nuns as well. So, but those are my three favorites.
Question to Dear Ajahn. I have heard you say that the five spiritual powers, bala, must be balanced. But how can there be too much pañña bala if basically the practice is about wisdom? Thank you.
Good question. So pañña, in the initial stages, so there's three ways of cultivating wisdom, right? The three ways of developing wisdom is through reading, listening, reasoning in your head. Is it logical? Does it make sense? Then contemplating it, contemplating more deeply, seeing that it sounds, seeing that it makes sense, developing conviction in a teaching as being wise, and then through the meditation. The problem can occur in the first two stages, where it's intellectual or academic, applying the intellect and intelligence. So one quality of wisdom is that it sees the drawback in things, and that's a good thing. To see the drawback in things is what helps us find Buddhist practice, and it helps us keep precepts. So knowing the genuine drawback of things is necessary. But having an overactive fault-finding mind can be a really big challenge. So when focusing on the fault and being hypercritical, that's something that can be destructive to practice. And there was one occasion where Ajahn Sumedho was living with Ajahn Chah, and he was upset with him about a few things that, Lumpur Cha was saying the monk should do this, the monk should do that, but apparently sometimes he didn't do exactly what he told the others should do. And one day Ajahn Sumedho came to Lumpur Cha with a long list gave him a piece of his mind and told him, look, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, it's not right, it's hypocritical, it's annoying, should be a better example. And it's kind of a classic kind of a thing that a Western monk would do to an arahant. Come with a big list of all the things that's wrong with them. And Lumpur Cha answered, you know what, Sumedho, it's really good that I have these faults, and because if I was perfect, you wouldn't know where the real practice is. What you need is perfect insight. What you need is perfect realization. You need to find that in yourself, spotless, immaculate purity in your mind. So it's good that you can't find that in me, but please carry on in your cultivation and find it in yourself. So, the Lumpur Sumedho, I'm sure, has a very good wisdom barami, a lot of wisdom. And with wisdom often comes idealism. And also when you look at, for example, the factors of jhana, vitaka and vichara, placing the mind on the object, kind of knowing the quality of the object. And then there is piti, sukha, ekagata, rapture, tranquility, one-pointedness. If people have, to get real samadhi, if people have too much of the first two, like thinking about the object too much, trying too hard to know the object, getting, like when we say know the object, it's know it with mindful awareness. It's not know it intellectually. Many people misunderstand this when they read the Anapanasati Sutta. Breathing in, one knows the breath is long. Breathing out, one knows the breath is long. Breathing in, one knows the breath is short. You're not supposed to be sitting there commenting, oh, that was a long one. Oh, that was a short one. It's not an intellectual exercise in commenting on everything. It's the limitation of language. Breathing in, one knows it's long. Breathing out, one knows it's short, means you know it as it is in the moment, according to its quality, according to how you're experiencing it moment by moment. But an overactive mind that doubts the meditation object, wonders about the meditation object, interferes with the meditation object, a big sense of self, I'm going to comment on everything constantly. This is a big problem. And so this is where this is a big obstruction for modern people, because we grow up being conditioned that we're allowed to criticize everything, and that we should criticize everything. It's kind of like a modern virtue to leave your critical comments on Twitter or X or YouTube or wherever you like. And sometimes it's really not helpful. If you want to have a bright, peaceful, content, and still mind, having a lot of critical thoughts isn't helpful. And it doesn't mean that there isn't some relative truth to one's critical thoughts. I'm just saying that if it's out of balance, there's a strong sense of self with irritation and aversion, making negative comments constantly in one's mind. That's not ever led anybody to enlightenment. So this is where we need, when the strong faith, one of the qualities of faith is we really have faith in the Buddha, and we think about the Buddha, the mind feels glad and happy. Isn't it wonderful that there are Buddhas? Isn't it beautiful that the Buddha has these amazing qualities? You just think of the Buddha and you think of the Arahants, your favorite great disciples I was just talking about. You think of them and you just incline the mind to feeling glad and then contented. And this contentment plays a really, really important role in developing samadhi. Being able to be content with the level of peacefulness that you have while laying the causes and putting forth more effort inclines the mind to have deeper and deeper peacefulness. Having lots of doubts about the object, having lots of frustration, restlessness, worry about it, comments about it, changing the objects too much because you don't think it's working, all of that can be not so helpful. And so faith, knowing how to do the samatha practices, the anusatis, recollection of the Buddha, recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of the Sangha, enlightened people, metta bhavana, things that we do to gladden, brighten the mind, incline the mind towards wholesome states of contentment. This is what's going to give the mind the samadhi which we need. Wisdom in the later level. So you've got the suttamaya pañña, chittamaya pañña, and bhavanamaya pañña. The wisdom that comes from reading, studying, listening, the wisdom that comes from contemplating deeply, but then there's the wisdom that arises from disciplined, sincere meditation, commitment to meditation. That needs, so the wisdom ultimately that one's going to have insights into is pretty simple. It's aniccaṃ, dukkaṃ, and anattā. It's seeing these three characteristics. It's seeing that everything that one experiences is rising and staying for some time and ceasing, and that it's not a self, and that it's not fully satisfactory. There is unsatisfactoriness, in as much as even pleasant phenomenon ceases. And that's kind of unpleasant, being separated from the pleasant. Unpleasant often changes to unpleasant. So there's no lasting satisfaction in any of these phenomenon. But it sounds so simple, right? There needs to be a certain amount of stability, a lot of stability in the mind, and a lot of clarity in the mind. So the mind needs to be clear and stable and still to really see it on a deeper level. Not as a thought, not as a concept, but as a vipassana insight. It really needs to see arising, staying for some time, ceasing, nirodha, aniccaṃ. And people get enlightened seeing that. But obviously, what's the difference between when somebody who gets enlightened sees it and when we see it? The difference is they have a lot of integrity to the quality of clarity. They have a lot of stability so that when they see it, they really see it. And then even till we use the word say, they is the limitations of conventions, right? That practitioner's mind really sees it, and then they understand that it's not a self. How could it possibly be a self? And the self is based on the assumption of permanence and seeking pleasure and those things. So when clear mindfulness with stability sees impermanence, then the sense of self falls away. It's because what it's grasping, what it's basing its grasping upon is seen through. It isn't permanent. It isn't satisfactory. It is not self. So we do need samadhi, and we need faith, and we need our wisdom to be balanced with all sorts of wholesome qualities like gratitude, respect, humility, and an overacting sharp intellect can be a big problem. So we need it to be the right amount. Intelligence is a very good thing, and if we know how to apply our intellect, it's wonderful. In that contemplating the suttamaya pañña, the chittamaya pañña, the wise reflection, Lord Buddha does say that yoniso manasikara, wise reflection, does lead to ever increasing growth in wisdom, but wise reflection. So we also have to know what is wise and balanced. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. I've known many monks who came with great faith and stayed in the life for a period of time and got very fault-finding and left the training because the teachers weren't good enough, the monks weren't good enough, the monastery wasn't good enough. And so, they get so far, and if the fault-finding mind isn't seen for what it is, nothing is good enough. And I'm sure their lay life situation isn't any better, but in most cases, but they just can't stand to stay anymore because nothing's up to scratch. So yes, fault-finding mind is potentially dangerous.
Ajahn, question 3. Dear Ajahn, when I read Dhamma book recently, even in the darkest moment by Venerable K Rathansara, I came across this phrase, "True Dhamma will disappear from the world. We do not know when, but it will happen in due course." I felt really disheartened and fearful after I read this statement. I'm thinking, in the event if I am still not enlightened when this happens, how will I manage? There must be too much suffering to go through. It is beyond imagination. Hence, I started recently to make aspirations with regards to meeting the future Buddha and hoping to meet the Bodhisattva in tusita heaven before then, if I'm not enlightened. I know deep down within me that I really aspire to reach nibbana soonest, hopefully this lifetime. However, there are some doubts. I hope that Ajahn can give me some advice.
Yes. Most people aspire to as quick a liberation as possible, at least in Theravadan circles. And it's a good aspiration to have. And of course, it's for busy modern people, it's not so common to become enlightened. So I understand this person having some reservations or some doubts or some concerns. One has the aspiration and one does one's best. But yes, it is the case that the Dhamma, the true Dhamma, the Buddha Dhamma will disappear from the world, absolutely. And the Lord Buddha said he said it won't disappear overnight, it will gradually change so that it's not the pure Dhamma anymore. And then it will disappear. So yes, this is why when we meet the Dhamma, we meet the teachings and have the opportunity to practice, we do have to knuckle down because we have to lay the karmic causes that we will meet with similar things again in the future. I think it's good to be, I'll tell you a story. When I went to Sera Monastery as an 8 Pansa Bhikkhu, I had some interest in Vajrayana. And I probably had a tendency towards a bit of dejection. These emotions, kind of a spiritual emotions of samvega and nibbana, world weariness, spiritual sadness. I was, as an 18-year-old boy, 18-year-old young man, I had a collection of Thomas Hardy novels, right? So I used to like to read sad stories. So my favorite movies are sad movies. So there's a bit of I guess maybe because I think that reflects truth more about what we experience in life. And so when I met one of the previous abbots who was reputed to have psychic powers, I was wearing an amulet under my robe that nobody could see that my teacher had given me. As a very special amulet made by a monk called Somdet Do about 150 years ago. And there's a particular mudra that Somdet Do does. I'll show you. There's a hand on his hand in front of his chest. And so he was famous for that mudra, and you don't really see it anywhere else. So I was paid respects to this elder, Kangyo Khenso Rinpoche in Sarah J Monastery. And he looked at me and he made that mudra. He looked at me and he did his hand like this and he put his hand like this. And he said, our traditions aren't really any different. And it was obvious that he'd seen the blessings contained within the amulet that was under my robe and that he was letting me know. And of course, Somdet Do was reputed to be one of the past lives of Maitreya in the Thai Sangha. So the Bodhisattvas do get born in Theravadan countries, of course. There's more overlap than people realize. But this monk had seen, had seen the blessings contained within the amulet that my teacher had given me and had let me know that without making it as a statement. But he looked at me and he said, you need to develop a long-term optimistic view. And that was helpful because at that time, 8 punters, about early 30s, I think it's healthy, young men who come to this tradition, it's healthy to want vipassana, jnanas, jhanas, maggas, palas, nibbanas, parinibbanas. We want the best results from the practice. We want jhana and stabilized jhana and amazing access to samadhi on every in-breath, like my teacher. There's a lot of desire mind, there's a lot of trying, and then sometimes you don't quite get it. You don't get it to quite the same degree, and it can be a bit frustrating. And there's a lot of kind of aversion to samsara as well. There's aversion to dukkha. There's aversion to the conditioned reality. You want something better. That's why you become a monk. And so the mind can go through kind of periods of good practice, feeling, inspired and elated. And then it can go for periods where things kind of plateau and the mind can get a bit dejected. And it looks like you might not become fully enlightened quite as quickly as you want to. So, monks also experience this. And so when he just looked at me and he said, you need to have a long-term optimistic view. And it's a simple statement, but it's quite profound. Just some kind of belief deep in your heart that eventually everything's going to be okay. I think we need that. We need to have that. It's just a confidence. Everything's going to be okay. If you practice dana and you keep your precepts and you do your meditations, you will keep meeting these teachings. You will be born in places with other like-minded people who have laid down similar habits. And I can see it very clearly in my own life. I met someone who taught me a samatha meditation method in a New Age bookstore when I was 15. Other people were telling me I should do a 10-day meditation retreat when I was 18 and 19 and 20 until I did it. But 3 or 4 or 5 different people said, you should do this retreat. You should do this retreat. You should do this retreat. I'd never had any religious education. And there just happened to be a Vipassana center up in the Blue Mountains 2-hour train ride from where I was living. And so I can just see in my own life that, yes, there must have been some practice in the past because people were telling me to get back to practice and the center was there. And it's like, there's reasons for why we're born where we're born and the influences we meet and the influences we don't meet. But if you have you have a really deeply committed practice, dana, sila, bhavana, your generosity, your ethical precepts, your mental cultivation. You do things like retreats, pilgrimages, check in fortnightly on this teaching and your other teachers. You are laying deep imprints, and also every single one of those things is meritorious and it's potent merit. And so it is true that we're going to have a descending period of darkness where virtue in the world is less and less and conflict and disease is more and more, etc. But it's also true that after a period, it starts to pick up again. And then it's going to be really good for a really long time, actually, because, once the lifetime goes down from 100 years to quite, I think it's like 10 or 15 at the worst, people killing each other and lifespan gets very short. But during the time when Maitreya comes, the lifespan of human beings is 80,000 years. But the peak that it gets up to is 100,000 years. But it must be literally hundreds of millions of years before that when the lifespan gets up to towards 80 years, 100 years again, and then it's on this long period of incline where things are getting better and better in this world. More and more people are being generous, more and more people are being virtuous, more and more people have loving kindness, more and more people have forgiveness. And so the age span keeps increasing, the merit of the people being born in the world keeps increasing. And famine gets less, disease gets less, war gets less, and it gets better and better and better until 100,000 eons, until the lifespan is 100,000 years. And then it's when it comes down to 80,000 years when Maitreya arrives on the scene. But you're going to have the opportunity to have hundreds and thousands of virtuous lives before you meet Maitreya. If you don't, it's like that. It does say that there's going to be a seemingly interminable period of darkness, but it is terminated. The darkness changes to light. In the human realm, it's like there's periods where it's closer to hell and there's periods where it's closer to heaven. So we are in a descending period, unfortunately. But after that, it picks up. And so, the other thing is there are other universes. I asked some of my teachers, there are other universes where teaching Buddhas are teaching right now. So you don't have to necessarily be attached to this world too much. One thing I tell people is to set the aspiration when they die. They don't have to be they don't have to be specific about the details. They have to be specific about the intention. So make your intention, may I be born where I will meet the true Buddha Dhamma. May I be born where I can practice Buddha Dhamma. And then you have Buddha, you're training with Buddha. You're thinking of Buddhas all the time. And what Buddha means, enlightenment, awakening, liberation. And you just set the intention after your meditation, after making merry. So may I always meet the true Buddha Dhamma. May I always meet Buddhas and their teachings, their well-practiced disciples. And don't worry about the details. And may I have the opportunity to practice. And you just have that in your heart of hearts as your most sincere intention, and you keep placing it in there again and again and again. You can trust that that's very powerful if you do it for decades and you really, really, really mean it. And I'm sure that's what I did myself, which is why people started to tell me, you should do the Vipassana retreat. You should do the Vipassana retreat. So other people were getting me back on track. And why I was living in a place not far from one such place where there were such opportunities. And so I can see in my own life that past merits manifested fairly quickly, and was born in a good place, and in those days quite safe, abundant. And then whenever I took a step on the path, someone else appeared and kind of guided me in the direction of the next step. So I think that the long-term optimistic view is having confidence that every little bit of merit that you make, every little gesture of practice that you make is sowing the causes to keep meeting the practices, and sowing the causes to keep having opportunities, and sowing the causes to keep meeting people like yourself who cherish such things as much as you do, even more so. So we will keep meeting people that also want to practice. And yes, and just to reiterate again, there are other universes where Buddhas are teaching. There are other universes where Buddha's dispensations are still like ours. And the Buddha described our universe as the Ananta Chakawara, the unending universes. There's a lot of worlds out there. And, just go out and look at the night sky if you're not in the city where the light kind of, and if you're in the rural countryside, you go out and look at the night sky and look at how many stars there are and look how many galaxies there are. And just, you have that optimism. Wherever it is, I'm going to find it. Wherever there is Buddha Dharma in this universe, I am determined to meet it. And then, setting these very, very strong, sincere intentions is powerful. Mind is the forerunner. And one Tibetan text, I believe, says that anybody who practices the 5 precepts in this degenerating part of the eon, Maitreya, because keeping 5 precepts is harder when most people don't. Apparently, it makes even more merit if you keep them during this dark period. And then that particular Tibetan text says that Maitreya will personally liberate you because you kept 5 precepts in the darkening part of the eon. So, it's things like that. There are things that one can read that inspire some optimism. And apparently Maitreya will have the ability to teach people in hell. He has, that's the thing about how he was the effort path of the Bodhisattva. So it took him 16 asankhya, 4 times longer than Shakyamuni Buddha, that he spent building his virtue. And apparently in the time when Maitreya comes, the whole world is Buddhist. Like now we have about 500 million Buddhists out of 8 billion people. When Maitreya comes, everyone's a Buddhist because he made karmic connections with all those people for so much longer and so much more merit. And all these people with merit who made merit with him were all there at the same time. So you have a whole Buddhist world. And, it's nice to think about these things that he's definitely coming. Previous Buddhas have mentioned him. Our teaching Buddha has mentioned him. The Arahants mentioned him. He's definitely there. He's done most of the work. For him, it's just like probably his in full enlightenment after 16 asankhya seems like, in 5 minutes time for him. For us, maybe 300 million years. But it is coming. And we it's good to contemplate the future Buddha and set the aspiration to meet him. And it is possible that we'll go off track a bit, but we've made good karma as well. And hopefully when Maitreya teaches you or we won't be in hell. But it's good to remember that he did say that even if you are, he's going to liberate you. So that is the degree of his metta. And so things like that, when you struggle with a bit of dejection, think about how wonderful the bodhicitta of the Buddhas is, how vast it is, how, Maitreya could have been an arahant billions and billions of lifetimes ago. The reason he delayed it was to help, hopefully, all sentient beings. But all of those with good roots and karmic affinity with previous Buddhas, he's doing this for us. He's doing it for you. Think in ways like that. Like Maitreya built all this virtue so that he could help me. And I'm determined to meet him. I want to pay respects to this wonderful, selfless, beautiful being. I want to see his spread metta throughout the whole world system and liberate all these. And it's because that time. There's a book, I think the Wheel Publications produced called The Prophecy of Maitreya, where they take different commentarial texts, I think from the Burmese tradition. And some people wrote some things about that time, which, they make sense. They apparently, Maitreya Buddha, when he gives his 84,000 princes and 84,000 princesses go forth on the first day. So there's no discussion about can there be bhikkhus, can there be bhikkhunis, because it's a time of no prejudice. It's a time of great harmony. There's no disease in the world. The only disease in the world is aging and hunger and death. But there's no illnesses, and there's no war, there's no famine. And so the princes and the princesses all get along. Wouldn't that be nice? And they 84,000 princes and 84,000 princesses go forth on the first day and become enlightened at the first sermon. And you can just do some creative visualization. If you get a little bit distracted, if you get lost, well, set the intention. I'm going to be one of those princes. I'm going to be one of those princesses. Whatever you prefer. You can be a prince. You can be a princess. You can all be a prince. You can all be a princess. I'm going to be an arahant. I'm going to be an arahant disciple of Maitreya. And, set that intention that if I haven't done it by then, I'll do it on that grand occasion. And since Maitreya will be around for 80,000 years, he'll have a few minutes for you, I would expect. Just kind of, I've made my appointments at the Bodhi tree many times. And I've got a few things I need to discuss with Lord Maitreya. And I'm sure he'll give me a couple of minutes out of his 80,000 years in that last life. So, we just kind of, yes, long-term optimistic view. And when you have a character that loves truth, respects truth, loves virtue, that those seeds are going to ripen in the future. And it's probably going to be the case that you might go to another world system where there's a Buddha's teaching, you might go to a heaven world for a period of time. And then when the virtue in this world begins to come up again, you'll start to be born in this world with other virtuous people. And you may have thousands of quite lovely lives with virtuous people helping to prepare the world to welcome Maitreya. So sometimes we have to stretch out our view to encompass, the rest of the eon. But do have a long-term optimistic view in your potential, in the power of merit, and in the fact that all of that good karma is going to ripen as more opportunities to make more good karma and receive the benefits of that good karma. Your wise companions, wise friends, suitable conditions, suitable places, suitable teachers, the pure teachings. So have faith, have confidence. Buddhas are wonderful, and there's many people in the queue. They're coming.
Question for Dear Ajahn. Why is it that after the passing of my sister, my mother, and my rabbit, I still feel I contributed to their dismise? There are things that I could have done but I did not do, and things that I should have not done but I did. What force is at play here? Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know this person personally, and I don't know if they were mean to their mum or their sister or their rabbit, right? Probably they weren't. Probably this person is a good person, and but not a perfect person. And so we can all, 2020 hindsight, look back and think about what we should have done and shouldn't have done. And so it's important to know that doubt is one of the 5 hindrances. So you recognize doubt as it, should I have done this? Should I have done that? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? Am I responsible? Am I bad? And aversion is another one of the 5 hindrances. So that could be self-aversion, withholding loving kindness to yourself, beating yourself up, excessively fault finding. And so we just need to see, well, which of the hindrances are affecting the mind? When you come to sit, is there self-aversion present? Is there ill will being aimed inwards? Is there never-ending doubts? And then we have the practice of forgiveness. What was, and you can just decide, I forgive myself. I forgive myself for the mistakes that I made. I forgive myself for not having been perfect. I allow the situation to be what it was, and I let it go. The past is the past, but your mind can keep hankering over it and picking it up. But it is gone. And the opportunity that you have is the present moment today in terms of sowing merit and building good qualities and making wholesome connections, all of that. That's about today and tomorrow, today and the future. So sometimes we have to be energetic in our forgiveness practice. Sometimes you can't completely forgive yourself. We all make mistakes, and some of our mistakes are big mistakes. And so you have to set the intention, I am going to completely forgive myself. And then that's a process. You may have forgiven yourself in a moment when you could, and then a week or two goes past, and a month comes past, and there's the same judgment and the same negativity and the same withholding of metta, and you have to forgive yourself again. But the point is, you make a commitment. I will forgive myself. I'm going to forgive myself. And because we all act under the power of greed, hatred, and delusion. And that's worthy of compassion. If you really, really knew, like, well, I should have known better, I should have known better. Yeah, you should have known better, but in that moment you didn't. Why? Because greed, hatred, and delusion was affecting the mind. If you didn't have greed, hatred, and delusion, you'd be an arahant already. So it's like, it's the situation we're in. These qualities darken the mind, they cloud clarity. Our latent bad habits will bubble up at times and we'll act on them. That's the situation we're in. And the training that we have of cultivating the more wholesome habits, it's a training. It takes time. It's like trying to stop a train. It's like only, Superman can do it. He can stop the train. For the rest of us, we're kind of like trying to, but there's some momentum there. And, it's going to take time to build up those muscles and stop the train. And it's a process. It takes time, and that's okay. So the practice of forgiveness is important. But I think also recognizing that the mind kind of likes to obsess endlessly about what it could have done differently and doesn't change the path. You have to apply the wisdom. It was what it was. It is the past. Forgive it. Forgive yourself. Make the most of today. And then, when it comes to deceased relatives and pets, etc., if you do make some good karma today, you dedicate merit to those beings. It's like you can still have a positive relationship with them now, in terms of when you think of them, you have kind thoughts. When you make good karma, you dedicate and share the merit with them. You can kind of make up for it in a way and have some confidence that the merit will reach them where they are. So, yeah, all the best with that process.